Hello and welcome everyone, this is Taco Movie Talks. I have a plethora of videos that I have planned for you, so be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. But today we're talking about Exorcist Believer. As you're hearing this, it's after the movie released in theaters. And if you've watched anything on my channel when it comes to spooky movies, you probably stumbled upon my Exorcist, the OG Exorcist videos. Whether it be the podcast I did with Dadman or the most important horror movies of all time. And I encourage you to check those two videos out. The way that Exorcist Believer presented itself, paying very much homage and bringing characters back, it is nearly impossible not to compare the two movies, and it's not a good comparison for Exorcist Believer. When I thought about this movie very shortly after walking out of the theaters, I could only really give credit to really two aspects, and one is a fairly major aspect, and it's one that you see a lot in the trailer, in that Exorcist Believer did a pretty darn good job with the makeup of the two possessed daughters. I did think that that was very good. Was it as good as the original? I think I'd still have to go with the original, which is just, should tell you how, I mean, that is like world-class makeup. I mean, it holds up almost 5 decades later. And the other thing was the kind of face of the demon. So in the original Exorcist, you have Pazuzu's face shown, I think, a couple of times, maybe 3 tops. And in this, they kind of did a similar thing where they show you the actual face of the demon very, very quickly. It was good. Maybe even slightly better than Pazuzu. I'm not sure. I mean, that face is just creepy because I think for the time, nothing like that had really been done. So this had something to inspire that. So it wasn't necessarily an original thought. So from that standpoint, it kind of evens things out. But a little reminiscent of Marilyn Manson, who, and that's no shade at all to this movie or Marilyn Manson, as I think when it comes to like macabre or horror iconography coming from, you know, a music video, I would say Marilyn Manson is probably top 2 with Rob Zombie, another horror director. Ironically, talking about Rob Zombie in a David Gordon Green directed movie. But aside from that, this movie tries to do the slow burn, which doesn't work because of the ending. But before we get to that, I mean, this movie's super, super inspired. It starts out outside of America, dogs fighting, which is another scene pulled directly from the original. And it's trying to give you this sense of an ancient evil being unlocked. But it goes about it in I just don't think it was as effective a way that they did it. It kind of points towards there's a more advanced and sophisticated knowledge of evil and how to fight it. But the original beginning, I think, gets forgotten a lot. But it was really freaking good. And it gets you unsettled early on. Which there should be something said to that. And how good the movie does with its beginning alone. It kind of, it like a slow burn, it gives you little jump scares, and there was 2 that actually kind of got that like jolt going through your body, but it was very short-lived too, because it just kind of gives you a jump scare and then it kind of lets you off easy afterwards, where you're not kept in perpetual suspense afterwards, like, oh, I need to be on guard still. So from that standpoint, it wasn't even really as good as it probably should have been. And when it comes to these cheap type of thrills, you're really looking for something more than that. So the middle, you give it a lot of leeway because you feel like it's building up to something spectacular at the end. And that did not turn out to be the case. In fact, the ending is actually the most disappointing aspect of this film. And I think where everything really starts to fall apart for it. The actual exorcism I thought was so lackluster that it almost kind of ruined the entirety of the movie. I was thinking that the ending is going to be good and better than what I'm seeing. It felt like, oh, this is a 3, you know, and I also went into this movie with the knowledge that people were not enjoying this at all, and a lot of people thought it was just pure garbage, giving it half stars on Letterboxd, 1 stars, 1.5, 2 stars, and I think I'm much closer to that now, and I'll give you my rating at the end, but and this is where I'm gonna get into spoiler territory. Pretty much everything else is very surface level information, stuff that you saw from the trailer, which is something I will also notice or mention, in that they did a good job of promoting this movie. You have the big brand of The Exorcist, which they paid $400 million to acquire, but didn't think to get a good director to do the project, and then you come out with this, and very disappointing, I think, for a lot of Exorcist fans. And they put pretty much every moment from a scene that was done well into the trailer, so it makes you think that the entirety of the movie is going to be done like that. And it was really just the execution of the ending that really stuck out as, this is just bad. The other part that I can just immediately point to, the original feels so damn rooted in realism that it makes the proposition that this could happen, it made you think, what if that happened to me, if you're younger and watching it, or if you're a little older, like, what if this happened to my kid? And that is where the absolute fright, the absolute terror, the horror of the movie really stems from. But the exorcism just really made this unbelievable, and this is the spoiler territory. There was like an I think it's an ectoplasm scene, very reminiscent of A Haunting in Connecticut, but it just came off super cheesy and unlike anything that I've seen in an Exorcist movie before. And I've seen 3 of them, the original Exorcist 3 and I think Exorcist Dominion, and it took it out of the deep rooted realism that makes Exorcist movies generally very good. And it's not to say that, okay, these things don't happen, but it puts it in a sphere that makes you think it could. And that is the horror of it. And on top of that, the whole you have to choose, which is rooted where the father of the black daughter had to choose between his wife and his daughter. He ends up choosing his mom, but that is not the choice that the mother takes, so the daughter is born. And the demon says, you have to choose between me and the other daughter. And it was a trick, which is probably going to be the most famous quote of the year, where a priest says, oh, they tricked us, when the father of the white daughter says, I choose you. And the devil decided that we're going to give you the opposite choice. Whoever says it first loses, basically. Which, looking back on it, is kind of funny that they thought this was going to be a super great twist. It just felt like it lost all momentum at the end. Or everything that it was building towards, it could not live up to. If you're going to buy one of these, they're going to make some money, probably. Well, I don't know. Are you going to be able to make $400 million back on this movie alone? Because I don't think a lot of people are going to go see the sequel out in theater. That's just me. Unless you get a different director, different writers, it's it might just be a lost investment at this point. But that's my take. I had to get that out there because Exorcist is, in my opinion, the best horror movie of all time. I know that's one of those claims that sounds like hyperbole. It sounds incredibly hyperbolic. Something like, of the over 200 movies I've rated and ranked on my Letterboxd, it's number 1. And I think the only 2 movies that are remotely close that could potentially dethrone it are The Shining, which I think has a very good argument, and then Jaws, which It's just a really well done movie, but when it comes to iconic horror moments, Exorcist kind of has it beat, and I think it's way more horrifying than Jaws. But that's just my take. I appreciate you joining me for this video. I don't recommend you going and seeing it. At the very least, wait until it goes on streaming, because it's not worth the price of admission. And again, thanks for liking, thanks for subscribing. I'll catch you on the flippity floop. Bye, y'all.